welcome to another episode of Come Back Stronger, where we bring you stories of people who have overcome adversity and have come back stronger. My name is Jimmy Fasig. I'm here with my law partner, Dana Brooks, and today we are going to bring you the story of Mr. Arnold Sampson. He is a Vietnam veteran, and he unfortunately he was flying helicopters during the Vietnam War. He was a medical evacuation specialist.
Saw all kinds of things.
He saw all sorts of things, and he comes back from Vietnam, and he, like many other soldiers, developed PTSD.
Yeah.
And he went through some major challenges because of that.
Right.
But it's a classic comeback story.
Yeah. He's taken his experience and he's trying to help some other veterans. He is a highly decorated helicopter pilot. He's very humble. You won't hear about that, so we're going to tell you a little bit about it on our breaks. But he went on to write a book based on his call sign. It's Dustoff, More Than Meets the Eye, to kind of peel back what people think they know about the military experience, specifically the Vietnam military experience. And he shines a light on things, and I think by sharing that story, it kind of helped heal him and heal the other people as well. Classic comeback.
Yeah, it's a comeback story because what he did is he actually used the writing of the book as a cathartic type thing to heal himself, but he puts it out there obviously as a book to help other people to know, and particularly war veterans, to know you're not alone and that it's totally normal for you to suffer PTSD after a traumatic experience, whether you're a war veteran or you've been through any other kind of traumatic experience. So his story is
very
really
interesting insights he's got.
Yeah, very, very interesting. We can't wait. We're going to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we will introduce you to Mr. Arnold Sampson. And you know what the insurance company offered him? $5,000.
Really?
He's completely blind, and they offer him $5,000. Ask him to sign a release.
To a lot of people, especially when they're hurting and when they're down and when they're vulnerable, $5,000 is a life-changing amount of money. And they're not looking at the value of what has been lost. They're not looking at what it would take to make that person whole, which is our job. That's our job. Their job isn't. Their job is to save the insurance company money.
Right.
And they look at this person and they go, I bet $5,000 would get your full attention. And they come in and they dangle it with a settlement release, and then once you sign it, you're done. You can't come back to us and ask us to wave a magic wand and make that go away. That can't go away.
My client didn't accept the $5,000. We took him all the way to trial. We got a $5 million verdict. Welcome to Come Back Stronger, where we are about to introduce you to Mr. Arnold Sampson, who is a Vietnam veteran who was the medical evacuation specialist in Vietnam, one of them, and he witnessed some horrible things and had to really deal with that when he came back. He's going to tell you his story. He's going to be interviewed by Ms. Carrie Roan.
Mr. Sampson, thank you so much for being here with us on the Come Back Stronger show. I can't wait to talk about your story.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Carrie. It's a delight meeting you.
I would love to talk about your book, but I'm going to save that till the second segment. What I want to start out with is your experience in Vietnam, what you did in Vietnam, what that was like for you, the hardships that you faced. So tell us a little bit about that.
Certainly. I was my branch of the Army. Before I got involved with ROTC, to me, well, they were just like, it was Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force, and also the Coast Guard. That's what I thought the branches of the military were. When I got in the Army, when I got in ROTC, I discovered that the Army had, I think at the time, it was like 19 branches. It makes plenty of sense. There was infantry, artillery, armor, Medical Service Corps, Medical Corps, Nurses Corps, on and on and on and on. Well, they showed me a hypnotic propaganda film showing the Dustoff mission, which is the call sign for Medical Evacuation Helicopter mission. I was so fascinated. They said after they showed the film, they said, "Who wants to volunteer for flight school or flight training?" And I think 13 people did. I was one of the dummies. Sorry, I said that. And it turns out, though, that once we had to go through the medical examination, the screening, and a little tiny aptitude test, that only 6 of us qualified for for aviator training. And so did the 8 months of aviation training, and I went to Vietnam as thinking I'd be a Dustoff pilot, and that all I would have to do is fly.
Uh-huh.
I was supposed to take on the full plate of duties as a commissioned officer. So I was assigned when I got to my unit as a supply officer. When I was on the ground, I would be doing the supply officer duties. Eventually, though, once I kind of got grounded, didn't take long, I began to fly missions.
Mr. Sampson, did you have any kind of defense on your helicopter when you would go into these combat zones to rescue people that had been injured?
We were formally Dustoff, which meant 4-man crew, no machine guns. And that was very unusual because just about every other aircraft flying under the U.S. auspices was armed with something, a machine gun, a minigun, rockets, grenade launchers, something. We had nothing. The only weapons we had were our personal sidearm and our M16, which we had we hung on our seat. So if we ever crashed, we might be able to pull it out of the aircraft with us to defend ourselves on the ground.
And very vulnerable flying up there without any type of defense. I mean, and I imagine as a medevac pilot, your job was to go into combat zones and pull out everybody who's injured, right?
Exactly. We the significance of our mission was, you call us, we went. We didn't care where you were. We didn't care what was going on.
Wow.
We didn't care what weather conditions there were, what time, day or night. If it was routine, we got to you as soon as we could. If it was urgent, you were top priority. And all we needed to get from our RTO, we called our RTO control. RTO stands for radio telephone operator. That's the person who received the calls from the field saying, we need help. We got 2 badly wounded men. Can you send a Dustoff? And when they called in, the unit would give the RTO, who we called control, we would give them coordinates and tell him what they had. One badly wounded U.S. soldier, which we called Uniform Sierra, or they would have 2 or 3 men. Whatever they had, we would come.
You would go get them. I mean, it sounds like
wherever they were.
It sounds like you're like, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it sounds like you're the hero of the heroes. You know, the heroes are out there in combat and they get torn up, and then you guys have to fly in and rescue the heroes. So you must have seen some really bad stuff.
I did.
Yeah.
I want to say we all did. I assure you, and I don't want to be a boring guest on the show, but the truth is, I was not seeking heroics. I was not seeking adventure.
Of course.
All I wanted to do was my job and my duty.
Right.
And our job was to go out there. The first period of my tour, I was a pilot, and it took me a while before I was elevated to an aircraft commander, which means I was the pilot in control. But we go out in the thick of it. Sometimes it was a cold site where contact had been had, or someone had sadly stepped on a booby trap and had gotten blown up pretty bad, shrapnel wounds. Sometimes things were blown off of them. Well, that's called a traumatic amputation. I don't want to pretend I was any more brave than anybody else, I assure you, but the truth is, the mission we flew, being a Dustoff, as you said, we would go out to get the wounded wherever they were, whenever they called for us. And we did see bad things.
And I know you wound up developing PTSD, which is something that you've spoken about already. What caused your PTSD? Was it one event in particular, or was it the horrible return that you had, to the country along with the other veterans, and how terribly you guys were treated when you came home? What was it?
Well, it was a series of things. One I can call one instance where I had a little girl die in my arms. Was one of the few things that hard for me to recall or talk about, but I do in my book. I had a Korean soldier get on the aircraft, and we were told to take them to the Korean aid station. He was two of them. One was wounded, and one was just accompanying him. And me, I got a bright idea. Wait a minute, the U.S. hospital Army hospital is better than that. We're going to go there.
Yeah.
He got there, and the escort, the accompanying soldier, wouldn't allow the wounded soldier off the aircraft, and he's holding an automatic weapon.
Oh, wow.
I thought, oh my goodness. So when I called for help, out comes a Korean officer who told him in their language, are you crazy? Let them get this man. And he said, no, I'm not doing it. And the officer took out his pistol, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to see a man get shot to death right here in front of my eyes. It came as close to that as anything could come. The guy cocked his pistol and pointed at the guy's head, and finally he relented. But those things left a mark on me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the time, it was just one of those things. But when I got home, and finally the cumulative effect of all that was, I was crazy to bed bug.
Oh, well, let's talk about that when we come back. I'm really interested to hear about what happened on your return and your book and your stories in your book and how you're trying to use all that PTSD that you went through and the hardships that you went through to change people's lives now for the better.
It never ceases to amaze me when I hear the war stories about how horrible we can sometimes dip in terms of humanity and how painful it can be.
You see the worst of that in war.
Yeah. And our soldiers have seen it, and then they come back. Here's what happened with him. He comes back, and he wasn't even greeted with a hero's welcome.
Not at all.
He was exactly the opposite. There was no applause when he came back. In fact, they were shunned. It was, and so he's going to talk a little bit about that I'm sure added to his PTSD.
Yeah, you've suffered things that most people can't even imagine and conceive of, and you've tried to help other people who've also suffered those things, and you're just trying to get them help, and you're all just trying to survive it, and then to come back home and be treated like this was maybe your idea. Or like you had something to say over it and you should be responsible for everybody's feelings about it. It was just a different time, and it's interesting. He'll talk about how it wasn't until Desert Storm that veterans started getting treated with the respect that they deserved, and it was a long time waiting for that for him. But having a child die in your arms, trying to get someone help, and then it turns into this, whatever this face-off is between these two men. There's no way you can just go through that and go to sleep and wake up fresh and everything's fine. You're going to have to pay for that at some point. And when we come back, I think he shares with us when that happened for him.
But there's a big toll that he ended up having to pay. Yeah. But the good part is that he ended up coming back stronger. He ended up writing a book about it and then helping other people and letting them know that they're not alone, and then help and so that they can get through this a little bit easier, a little bit better.
Right.
That's what it's all about. So we're going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to hear the second part of his interview, and he's going to tell you about his book.
She contacted me almost in a fugue. She couldn't believe that it happened. And something told her, this is not right.
She had lost her daughter.
This is not right. My little girl should be here, and I'm going to do something about it. She contacted me, and I went to see her, I think that day. And we sat at her dining room table, and she showed me the program from the funeral. And I met her sons and saw her gravesite, and I just told her, I don't know what happened, but I'm going to find out, and we're going to do something about it. And she and I bonded right then, and she's been in my life ever since. And seeing how she has used something that is an unimaginable loss and found some way to live a better life and make a better life for her son. There's nothing better.
Welcome back to Come Back Stronger, where we're introducing you to Vietnam veteran Arnold Sampson, who was a medical evacuation helicopter pilot and had experienced some really traumatic things and developed PTSD. And then he ultimately wrote a book about it, and he's helping other people who've gone through similar things. Here's the second part of his interview with Miss Carrie Roan.
Hi, Mr. Sampson. We're back from the break.
Mm.
The war was horrible. And I mean, obviously, what was even more horrible than the war, I think, was the terrible reception everybody received when they came back from Vietnam. You know, I wasn't alive. I wasn't born until 74, but I just wish we could reverse the hands of time. And I wish we could, it makes me like tear up, but I wish we could welcome all those kids when they came back from the war that they didn't even want to go to, you know, and it just changed so many lives. And I wish that we could give everybody the welcome they deserved, but I digress. I'm interested to know about the PTSD that you sustained when you came back. You said before we went to the commercial break that you came back and you felt crazy and you had a lot of, you know, I suspect a lot of emotional and mental issues to deal with your PTSD. And then I'm interested to know how you've overcome it or how you deal with it on a daily basis.
Unbeknownst to me, I was counting my fingers and toes for about 2 years. I didn't even realize it, but I thought, is this real? Is this real life, or am I really in a hospital in Japan? I mean, I wasn't sure what reality I was living in. And yes, the reception was very chill, very cool. It wasn't until, frankly, Desert Storm. Call me slow, but when Desert Storm, when the veterans came back from Desert Storm and got a ticker tape parade in New York, on Wall Street, near Wall Street, I cried, and I was shocked, but it made me tear up, and it was because I realized then what we had not gotten. I'm more paranoid now. I don't like to be around explosives. I don't go to fireworks. And the veterans in Maryland, I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, and veterans in Maryland, if I wear my Vietnam veteran cap, which I do almost all the time, someone sees me, says, "Hey, what year were you there?" And I tell them the year, and they say, "Welcome home." We're welcoming each other home 50 some years later. And that's how deeply we were touched by the fact that we didn't get a welcome.
Yeah.
We came back. In terms of the book, I mean, I wrote the book to get some things off my chest, but also later I realized that maybe by being specific about the things that touched me, that moved me, that tainted my humanity, that maybe other veterans would feel freer to open up and discuss what was on their heart, what they had experienced, and free themselves from the grasp of PTSD. Trauma is a terrible thing. I mean, I would think that our country was traumatized by the pandemic, but certainly Vietnam veterans were traumatized by the experiences that they had. Many, maybe almost all. And you know, there were almost 2 million veterans.
Wow.
And so I don't want to overstate my response.
Well, no, and I think it's really important that we talk about it, because you're not weak because you admit that you have trauma. You know, and it's something that in World War II, they called it shell shock. And there was really no treatment for the trauma after World War II. It was just, you have shell shock or you had a nervous breakdown. So I think it's really important as a veteran that you're sharing with other veterans what your PTSD is, so that they feel like they can be vulnerable and open up and heal too. You can help each other heal, right?
That's the hope. I mean, I happened to run into a fellow who was in ROTC a couple years behind me, and he and the guy who was one of my peers, 2 guys who were my peers, we got together at a place that I own and in Pennsylvania, and we spent the weekend. And the younger one of the group said that he had not been able to talk about his experiences in Vietnam in all those years, and he was glad to be able to talk about it finally. And the experiences he shared, his name was Robert Pratt, lieutenant. He retired as a lieutenant colonel. The experiences he shared would make you your hair fall out. I mean, I wish I could tell you one of his experiences, but I know that we have limited time. But
Yeah.
yes, we are all a lot of people carrying a lot of things inside, locked up inside, that they might do better venting, and they might have made better decisions had they vented sooner in their lives.
Right. Where can people find your book, Mr. Sampson?
It's available on Amazon. Thank you for asking, Carrie. It's available on Amazon. It's called Dustoff, More Than Met the Eye. I kind of thought to say that because the troops who were injured, fearing death, had to be fearing death, certainly in pain, they saw that Red Cross, and that's all they saw. They didn't even probably ever see the pilots. They didn't know there was more to it, but it was a whole lot more to performing our mission than just the chopper sound and the liftoff that we were able to bring into the field to save people. I mean, we had lives of our own, and we were trying to manage our way through that tour. I have nothing but praise for the crews, the men in Dustoff units. I mean, I praise every veteran. I think every veteran to me was a warrior, and some of those warriors were heroes.
Absolutely. And when you all went in, you guys were just boys, and you all rushed to enlist and volunteer, and it was your duty. And, there were very few people that avoided the draft, that dodged the draft. I mean, I would say that any draft dodger is weak, but it just was a different time in our country when it was what you were supposed to do. And it just is so honorable. So thank you very much. It sounds stupid for me to say thank you for your service, but I really do want to thank you for that.
It's not stupid at all. And thank you very much for saying it. It's much appreciated. I will say this, my misery did not need any company. And so if someone didn't go, I'm not mad at them. I mean, because that was an equal opportunity horror story. And from the nicest, the youngest, the oldest, the tallest and the shortest, anybody there could be in peril, including the chaplains and the unit clerks. They could be killed easily by a rocket launch or whatever. So my hat's off to all Vietnam veterans and veterans of all wars. I wish we didn't do war as a way to settle things.
I agree. Well, thank you. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but we've run out of time. But I thank you so much for opening yourself up to us and telling us about your book and everything that you're trying to do with the PTSD and the terrible times that you went through to help others with their struggles.
Thank you for having me. It was a delight talking with you. You're a wonderful interviewer, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Arnold Sampson.
Yeah.
What were your big takeaways, Dana?
His humility, particularly
That's
toward the
exactly
end.
what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's just, whenever he talked about how that was an equal opportunity horror show for everybody and that he doesn't give anybody grief, I think he's so happy to have survived that. And if he can give something to somebody else and help them with their PTSD, that he's more than happy to do that. And I'm glad that he shared his story. But it reminds me so many times when you're on the airplanes and people say, let the military people on or off first, and they announce that, and after a while it becomes background and you don't really appreciate what they're trying to do by those sorts of gestures. And I think we ought to remember every time we thank a veteran for their service, it's not trite, and I don't think they get tired of hearing it. I think it's a lovely thing to do.
One big takeaway for me, Dana, was that we're talking about a highly decorated war veteran.
He is, yeah.
He's a highly decorated war veteran.
2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, a Distinguished Flying Cross, among others.
But this is the takeaway, is that he said, I wasn't there to be a hero.
No.
I just wanted to do a job.
Yeah.
I had a job to do. And what I always encourage people to do is have a mission in life, have a purpose in life. And then by doing that, you will get the rewards that you want, that you might desire. So, boy, this has been a great story. It was a pleasure to meet Mr. Sampson.
Yeah, I can't wait to wrap it up.
A lot of takeaways. So anyway, we'll go to a commercial break and we'll come back.
It's also important to have lawyers who understand the juries.
100%.
So where you grow up in a place and you understand what makes people from that place proud, And in the Panhandle, what is that? Well, we have the world's widest sand beaches, the beautiful nature of the place, but also the strong connection to the armed forces.
Yes. It's important to hire a lawyer who understands the culture of where you're going to be and has an idea of the kind of people who will be on the jury should you have to try the case. And you better believe the insurance companies who will be deciding the value of the case, they look into that. And they want to know, are you a, big city lawyer coming over here? Are you coming up from South Florida? Are you one of those people? And it affects how your case goes. It affects the cooperation you get from the people you have to negotiate and work with to move these things through the court system. And it affects the general outcome.
Welcome back to Come Back Stronger, where we just heard the interviews of, with Mr. Arnold Sampson, who was a Vietnam War veteran. Man, he was a medical evacuation helicopter pilot, and he witnessed some horrible things and came back with PTSD.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, he came back stronger. He wrote a book about it. And what it makes me think of, Dana, is our clients.
It makes me think of that too, because there's so much shame associated with PTSD. If I can see you bleeding, I can have sympathy for you. But if it looks like it's in your head and you look otherwise okay, people have a hard time developing empathy, sympathy, that sort of thing. But he wrote this book. He found a way to get it out of himself and help other people. And like with our clients, a lot of times they don't want to go to therapy.
Right.
They don't want to admit that they can't walk this off.
Yeah.
They don't want to think about those things. But journaling is kind of like writing a book. It's just getting something that's inside of you, hurting you. It's getting it out of you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in therapy, a lot of times it's hearing from an objective person. Maybe getting some reinforcement that no, you're not crazy. What you're feeling is very normal. You're having a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation a lot of times.
It's very important for people to be able to vent. He was talking about how he went to rented a house with a group of other soldiers, and they just felt good because they were able to talk about it and be able to vent. And a lot of times when you suffer from trauma and it's affecting you, you don't want to admit it.
No.
And that is a challenge.
And you don't want to burden people around you with it. But it's not a burden to them. They want to help you. And if you don't have that support system, and not everybody does, you can find it. There are professionals who will help you, or like-minded people, or people who have similar situations like his veteran friends.
You can get out, you can get into groups. There are groups that you can help. There are all sorts of ways to go. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but this is
reach out to us and we'll put you in touch with people if you need it.
That's right, absolutely. And we look forward to seeing you next week for another episode.
I just recently had a case where the person didn't purchase uninsured motorist coverage, and he was hit by somebody that didn't have a lot of insurance, and that's the type of coverage that's supposed to help you and cover you if the person that hurts you doesn't have enough insurance. He didn't purchase it himself, but what he didn't know is that the insurance companies were required to do certain things in order to make sure that they gave notice to the client, or if they didn't do that, they have to give it to the client.
Yeah, give them the opportunity to purchase that insurance.
And my client had a broken femur, a broken hip, broken shoulder, and the insurance company wasn't going to offer it until we challenged them and said, no, you didn't fulfill your requirements. And next thing you know, we found out there was coverage because they didn't fulfill it, and there was $900,000 in coverage that we got.